Welcome to Lead Today with me, Kalyna. Let's talk leadership.
This episode would not be possible without Anchor. It's free and the easiest way to make a podcast. They're creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All right. Welcome to episode number 1. Man, the crippling perfectionism of recording that intro with the music. I have to just flat out say it. It's so weird to listen to your own voice and try to perfect. I mean, man, what even is perfecting an intro with music? I don't know, but it took me way longer than the 15 seconds that it is now. So, man, this episode, I would say I've wanted to do this for literally at least a year and a half, when I had my car accident in January 2019, and after that, my symptoms made it really hard to read anything and retain it. Even listening to stuff and retaining it was difficult after sustaining a traumatic brain injury, but definitely reading and trying to retain content for 8 months, it was really bad. Year and a half after, it's better. But podcasts and audiobooks and anything where I could close my eyes or and just simply listen has changed the way that I consume content forever. Before that, I really wasn't a podcast listener. So this is huge. And I also look at it and see so many podcasts where I'll get frustrated, I'll fast forward, I find things move slowly. I don't want this to trail on for hours and hours, and yet I actually recorded an interview with our first guest before recording this and found that it was so easy to just keep chatting and have the recording on. So I hope everyone finds it valuable. We'll see. I mean, it's certainly an experiment in the first couple episodes. The good news is that it'll only be family and friends for the first couple of episodes. So that's amazing, because the judgment will come from the people that have my personal phone number. So that's perfect. I wanted to share essentially what this is about, which is leadership via our daily actions. I've done career coaching, leadership development coaching, all sorts of corporate workshops. You know, the tagline is 4,000 hours with clients in 21 countries. And so I've talked to a lot of people one-on-one without recording it and sharing it publicly. And I figured, I'm getting paid for those conversations. They're confidential, of course. But why not find a way to have those kinds of conversations where everybody can benefit, one, and two, figure out how those people are doing this on a day-to-day basis. Every book I read, it has these principles and values, skills that we need to enact, tips, tricks, and yet somehow when I'm on my couch and it's way easier to watch Netflix or text a friend, read an article, clean my house, do anything other than the things I'm supposed to do, those books just sit on the shelf and don't really change my perspective. And so I wanted to figure out how people in different areas of their lives with different types of success have found a way to lead and discern what those traits are. And so that's actually what I'm writing about in my book, is what those different traits and skills are. The purpose of this podcast is going to be to discuss how people are leading daily and get that through stories and capture it in a more consumable way. So I think it's really inspiring to hear from people that have just gone out and done things. I think that's probably the one thing. If episode 1 had a takeaway, let's get to it before the 5-minute mark. I mean, for me, what I've learned is it's totally about execution. Like, if you think too long, if I thought any longer about recording this, I can assure you it wouldn't get done. I probably even shouldn't listen to this after this recording's done, because I would pick it apart and want to delete it. So I'm not going to do that. It is capped at 30 minutes from my web browser, which is what Anchor's telling me, which is totally fine. So we'll keep this one to 30 minutes. It's, of course, just with me. There will be other episodes just with me. I think I can provide some value on some topics and certainly shed some entertainment and value via my musings about different areas of my life and things that I've seen and stories that I have to share. So some episodes are going to be just with me. Others will be interviews with really interesting people from diverse backgrounds and points of view so that we can see where the similarities lie and maybe where. Wow, okay. Note to self, if the screen turns off, you lose your work. I'm just going to keep it because, like I said, I think if I try to do this perfectly, it's just not going to happen. So there's a bit of a cut before this next section, but hey, do what you got to do. Imperfect action, right? So what I was saying is I want to explore different points of view, and what I saw actually recently in Michaela Peterson's podcast, who's Jordan Peterson's daughter. He's a University of Toronto professor who went viral in talking about gender neutral pronouns. I find him really inspiring, and as she is actually, she's also really inspiring in what she's done to heal her body using a specific diet, the carnivore diet, I believe it's called. Anyhow, she has been doing episodes where she will effectively bring two people on opposing sides of the bench to the episode, and they've been they've been respectful, like nothing's been too heated or crazy from what I've heard. But I would love to do that. I would love to bring people, not to be contentious, but simply to promote an open discussion. I think what I've noticed more in the past year than I had consciously realized before is that there's been this silencing of true opinions. Of course, that's always existed, right? There are things that you don't say out loud, you certainly don't say publicly, and then there are things you say to close friends or family or behind closed doors. And I don't think that'll ever change. That's, secrecy or privacy. It's human nature, and I think it actually protects us. There's definitely a benefit to not just sharing everything with everyone all the time. So even selfishly, right, we benefit from not being completely open books. That being said, I can say that one of the motivators, so I already shared with you my first one. My first one was, of course, after the accident, my car accident, I really had a hard time consuming content other than audio only content. And so I figured I'm consuming so much of this. I would love to have something to add to the forum of discussion in this medium. The next was this topic that I've just brought up, which is this idea, really a feeling of feeling silenced. And I know that, I'm a very privileged white woman who grew up in Canada with, no war or any huge strife. And, I struggle with this of like, who am I to talk about anything? Because, of course, there are so many more qualified people and people that have been through more or different. It's just this comparison game. And I rationalized myself out of doing this for a while because of that. I listened to podcasts of really brilliant individuals that I do not feel I can hold a candle to when it comes to the type of discussion that I can have or the thoughts I have or this entire internal dialogue, right? And so I would sit there and listen to really great podcasts from brilliant minds and say, okay, I can listen, but I am absolutely not in a position to be the creator of this content. Who am I to do this? And I realized I have a real desire and need to regain my personal voice. And so I used to be more active on Facebook. I used to do lives. I would also, of course, meet more people in person and do speaking events. And I'm definitely missing that. So to regain my personal voice, to bring content in a forum that is easily digestible for myself, as well as my career. So as I mentioned, I've run lots of coaching sessions one-on-one and in groups with individuals, and I've really noticed it's the small things that leaders take note of and have really small habits that set them apart. And so I wanted to learn from people that are really crushing it in whatever field or domain they're in. And that doesn't even mean career in the traditional sense of, okay, this is what you do from 9 to 5. I'm talking about multi-passionate individuals who do a bunch of different passion projects and have, 6 different sources of income from side hustles and make bracelets, run a podcast, have a blog, do swimming lessons for kids. So I'm all about people figuring out the way that they're not just monetizing things, right? This is beyond monetization. This is about impact. And again, this web browser anchor thing has cut me off. So we're too far along now to restart this whole thing, which is fine. So we're just going to deal with this for episode 1. I will sort this out for episode 2, which I imagine I will be able to simply record on my computer and then upload. So, thanks for bearing with me as I figure this out. The final thing, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of why I started this, so car accident, feeling silenced and wanting to regain my personal voice, my career and wanting to learn from others in leadership positions in their lives. I believe everyone's a leader via their actions, by the way, so I just want to kind of put an asterisk on that. It's not, only CEOs and CFOs, although I do recognize people at the top of any hierarchical structure often have refined their craft. Of course, there are trade-offs, and it's really interesting to listen to Jordan Peterson's work actually on that, on, everything is sacrifice. So if you're putting more time into one arena, obviously others are going to not be as developed. And so some people glorify development in one area, but who's to say that's best, So I'm not saying leadership solely in the career arena. I want to talk about leadership in personal finances and being, a mom or a dad, a parent. I want to talk about leading in your own personal health. I think that's a big one. I surveyed some of my Instagram following, just, friends and stuff, about what they want to hear me talk more on, and it was fascinating. I mean, it was actually pretty well nothing about careers. There's a bit on, work-life balance, or working remotely, and how to do that more effectively, and working from home type of deal, because of course with the current situation, people are feeling that hard. That being said, people were super interested in my personal health journey and budgeting and financial help, which was fascinating. It was like, I'm not known for that, I don't think, and wouldn't call myself an expert in those areas. So it was very interesting to say, wow, we can discuss stuff with other amazing humans that know way more about these things than me, and I can learn, and then those learnings can also benefit anyone who decides to devote 30 minutes of their Sunday afternoon or otherwise to hearing me out and whoever's on the show. So this is, I think, a huge opportunity for me to learn, and even if one other person listens to this, I think I'd be happy. I'm probably even just happy if I just do this. This is like some kind of form of talk therapy, I would imagine, just talking into an empty room. So I'm thrilled that you're here. I'm excited to talk about every form of leadership imaginable within our daily lives. I'm really excited to regain a personal voice and make mistakes, get over a bit of this execution thing when it comes to being live. I sort of retreated into my own little bubble again after my accident. I had been far more vocal before, as I said. So this is a learning curve for me too, to get back on the horse, if you will. And so how we're going to function is I will do one of these every week. As I said, it might be me, it might be someone else with me, it might be a couple of people, like a panel, and then, like I said, we'll do a topic or maybe a couple of topics and kind of debate it out. I think that would be fun. If you've got ideas and you're listening, obviously feel free to get in touch with me. I listed an email, I think, there on the podcast. I'll even put my number up there. Why not? So if you've got an idea on how this could be better, I'm always happy to hear it, because I obviously, while I'm happy to talk into the void of my computer by myself, I think it's super important that whoever's listening is also getting value from what we're chatting about here. And so we'll do it every week. It's really anywhere you like to listen to podcasts. You can see that obviously Anchor is a link, but we've got it on Spotify. It is on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Google Play. I'm not sure what it's called. The Google Place for podcasts. And should be pretty much anywhere you can find them. So it will be different every week. I can't promise you the same type of episode every week, but I will be consistent, which is another huge piece of why I'm doing this, to consistently put out content that is meaningful. All right, just an update. This thing is only letting me do 5 minutes at a time, so I'm going to cap my talking in that way so I can figure this out for next time. Fascinating learning. It says 30 minutes. Anyway, so meaningful content, it will change in format. And if you want to support me, you can do so via the link. It's called Coffee, and essentially you can buy me a cup of coffee. It's a $5 donation to support the podcast, or you can do any other amount. And right now the goal is to buy a professional type mic and to get the gold coffee subscription, which will let me do cool stuff with content like repurpose it and have different membership options for people that want more content from me or different content. So it's a really cool platform for creators if you're interested. I'm not getting paid for this. Perhaps I should. I know they've got these sponsored segment things. But that's how you can support me. That's the platform I've set up. There are lots like them. But if you're looking to start a podcast, maybe that's something. Using Anchor for this recording and all the kind of back end on the podcast, and it distributes everything, which is pretty cool. And the support channel to give money to help me spend more time on this is Ko-fi, Ko-fi. So I was going to leave it at this, but I wonder if I should actually talk about leading daily a little bit more, since that's what this is about. I think just getting this episode live feels like leading today, because it's been something that's felt really daunting to me, because I can't take it back. It's this public episode. People can listen. You're sort of rawly exposing yourself based on whatever topic you're considering. And of course, there are varying levels of openness, as I said earlier. Doesn't really take away that nervous feeling before you hit record, at least in my opinion. It's still nerve-wracking to think, who's going to listen to this? I don't know. I can put it out there and I'll see that there are views, but I really don't know who's going to listen. I don't know if it's valuable. I won't know what people's judgments are. And yet, as I mentioned earlier, the whole point is execution, I think. And so if the theme of our first episode here is anything, it's definitely got to be about execution. And I'm sure I'll hear that come up time and time again, depending on the topic, because it's so easy to have ideas. It's so easy to want to do things. And of course, what translates that into reality that others can experience is putting it out there, right? If it stays in our heads, if this podcast stays in my head, if these words stay in my head, they certainly don't have any probability of helping anyone. And so at the very least, if I put it out there and it helps one person and 10 other people judge me negatively, it's like risk reward. It's still a reward in my mind, because one person is, it's way more than the zero that it would be if it's stuck in my head. So here we are. Weekly is another thing. So I mentioned that a second ago. I think those are the two things I'd want to kind of chat about, because in my past, I'd say I'm relatively outgoing. I'm willing to go ahead and risk doing things that are unconventional or perhaps frowned upon by others because I believe they're the right move for me at the time. So I'm decently okay with execution when I believe in something. The second piece that I would talk about today is probably the portion on consistency. So when I said, okay, we'll have episodes every week, that's a really easy thing to say. And yet listening to Jocko's podcast and how he essentially has had episodes every week for, I think it's some like 5 years or something like that. I might be exaggerating, over a year at least. And it's been every single week. He missed 1 week, and he says, I think his friend died, and so he took a week off, which, I mean, right? Granted. Otherwise, he's been there day in and day out, recording, producing, putting his stuff out there, finding people to interview that he is inspired by, as do all podcasters or content creators, right? It's like, okay, I'm at it again. I'm going to produce something new again. I want to deliver value again. And so I think that's fascinating and difficult. It's not difficult to do something once or 2 times or 10 times. There's something about the repeated nature of committing to something over a long amount of time that I personally find extremely challenging. I would say my genius zone or my strengths or where I do well is in the novel. It's about ideas for me and figuring out solutions to things that don't have solutions, or in coaching, listening to people, and every conversation is a novel conversation where there's a new challenge ready to be solved, right? And I get to support people to solve that challenge. And in building Chiefly, my software company, I would say that, I mean, it's super early days with Chiefly, and yet so many, my goodness, if you told me 5 years ago that I would be starting a computer, anything, machine learning computer software company, I don't know what I would have said to you. It was just simply the best tool for the job. I saw a problem with the work that I was doing with coaching and wanted to find a solution, and Chiefly is the manifestation of that solution, and it involves deep learning technology, which is heavy AI. I'm learning about things that are very technologically advanced, and it's fascinating. I think there's something there. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but hang with me. I think there's something there. I've learned in the founders world, people, investors, advisors will say, okay, you're, again, this, I mean, so cliche, like this imposter syndrome thing, I guess. But, they'll say, oh, who are you? You're not a technical founder. What makes you think that you can run this company? Why you? It's always, they're kind of core questions around product, around team, around traction that investors will ask, or advisors. And it's funny because it's like, why you, Kalyna? Why should you build this thing? And it's funny because I know the problem, and I know the solutions that I've seen work to fix the problem. That's why me. And I think sometimes, at least in the technical space, it's easy to get caught up with technical skills, and they're valuable as hell, believe me. It's really difficult to find somebody that's technically amazing and can execute and has some business sense attached to that execution and technical interest. What I can say about myself and starting this again, right? It's like, okay, so again, this question, right? Who am I? Who am I to run this podcast? Who am I to start an AI company solution? And I would say that I've actually noticed a really big advantage in not being technically inclined, because I don't care. Not I don't care, that's not fair. I need to choose. You have to choose your words so carefully when they're going to be stuck in this eternal podcast space. I care. I don't know the full implications of the tools, and I don't even know what all the tools are all the time. And so that's where technical experts can come in and pick which tools will best suit and what technology best solves the problems that we have at hand. That being said, it leaves me completely unencumbered to find ideas and implementation ways for us to actually solve a problem. I'm not worried about technical limitations. I'm not worried about what technology exists or not. I'm not picking a technology. I was just talking to a company where their CEO, CTO combo is like, oh, we need to use blockchain because blockchain's super sexy right now. We need to use blockchain. And then let's also talk about using AI because, if we use blockchain and AI, our investors are going to freak. Our customers are going to freak. We'll be the leader in the industry. We have to use this. I've never been encumbered by that because I didn't know much about it. And so I showed up with a problem and a solution, and I said, okay, I want to solve this. What are the tools to solve this? And people with technical skills said, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, here's how you can do this. Here's where you can start. Here's what's easier. Here's what's not. Here's what the technology is. And we can have that discussion. Long story short, sometimes the answer to who am I to do this thing, whatever this thing is, sometimes the answer to that is the perfect person because your skill set is so unconventional or so far removed from most of the people in the playground. If you're in a sandbox and everybody's got the same skills, we talk about this, right? There's kind of this idea. I think there's this notion with diversity and inclusion that has been turned into some sort of racial sexuality or gender identity. It's been turned into this thing of when it's done, I think, ineffectively, of checking boxes just to say, yeah, we're diverse, we're inclusive, we have people from different geographies or from different cultures and races and educational backgrounds. People, it's this kind of I don't know if the right word is tokenizing, but certainly somehow it's become this thing that we should do rather than looking at it when it comes to diverse skill sets specifically. And I think that's really interesting. Diversity of skill sets. And so if you're not a podcast expert because of the technology, which I'm not because I'm just learning how to use this podcasting tool, or if you're not an expert on the content of something, but you want to be in the space, maybe the fact that you have expertise in the hospitality industry as a server for many years, maybe that actually lends itself really well to a technical company that has most people that have never really served other humans but are focused on the technology, or a company that's been solely focused on their product, their t-shirts that they sell, but they haven't been very client driven. They haven't thought about it. They just wanted to make the best t-shirt in the world. And so you can always bring something to the table, and that I say that and man, it feels cliche, but I guess that's what I've learned so far with Chiefly and even running this podcast and quelling the doubts that I have in my mind that say, don't do the episode. You're going to mess it up. You're going to say something that isn't right. People will judge you. It's not going to be valuable. All those things that get in my head, right? So it's when we talk about execution and consistency, it's like number one, execution is getting all those voices, saying thanks for, looking out. But I am here with value, and the people that find value in it are going to listen. And on the consistency piece, I think it's about showing up knowing that it's really not going to be perfect or what you imagined, even if you plan it out, even if you have a script, even if it's some kind of structured idea, there will always be one or more things that don't show up the way that you thought. And so making that okay and making consistency be showing up rather than a burden. Consistency sometimes to me, or routine to me, can feel like a burden. And so rather than it being that, it's like, okay, it's my weekly day to record a podcast. Maybe I don't feel like it today, but this is the day I record a podcast. So what's going to make this the most enjoyable way to record this thing? What do I want to talk about right now that's going to be most enjoyable, most valuable? And let's talk about that. And maybe it's not the topic that that you start out with, but here we are. And I think that there's something so valuable and interesting about people that can do that. I'd mentioned Jocko earlier. Magical almost, where it's like, yep, I'm here every week. We trust people that are that way, right? We know we can depend on them, and that's amazing when you can depend on someone. And that means you can also depend on yourself, right? You'll follow through. I was just talking about this with someone. You have integrity. You say you'll do something and you do it. I think that sounds maybe like a platitude or just something to throw away and say that sounds wise. I mean, truly, I think there is a huge value add in following through. And so for me, I'm working on those two things: execution and follow through, the consistency, not overpromising. And so my hope is this podcast helps me to do that, and maybe helps you to do that somehow. Maybe it's a weekly show that you check out, or maybe it's not. And if you miss a week, no sweat. I will be here the next one. But that's what I want. I realized that I wanted more consistency from myself. Like, I want to depend on myself. And it's funny because I have people on my team depending on me. I have when I stop to think about it, I definitely have people that depend on me. And yet somehow I want to improve the way that I can depend and trust and really depend on myself. And so I'm just thrilled that you're here. I thank you for listening to my thoughts today. And I'm super excited because the next episode is actually going to be with Daniel Dembski, who founded a really cool company focused on clothes. It's called Unbound Merino. So we will get into that next time. In the meantime, and actually that might be less than a week away from now because I've already got it recorded. So you might get 2 in 1 week. How's that for service? I will work on that. Shouldn't be too hard to get that going, although, links and stuff. I'm going to try to make sure that the podcast notes are reflective of what we talk about and are useful, so that if you check out an episode, you can check out what we've mentioned and look at the links and stuff. So I will do that for today because I know I mentioned, Jordan, Michaela, Jocko, and others. So I'll make sure I do that. And I think that's it. Podcast number 1, reasonably completed, executed. Very good. I will sign out by saying, if you enjoyed this lovely little discussion, well, self-discussion, if you enjoyed me chatting a little bit about the purpose of this, the why behind this podcast, learning a bit more about me, and you want to see more of this, I would greatly appreciate your support via coffee. The link is also in the notes. If you buy me a coffee and want to share a coffee, super happy to do that. That might be a fun trend to start out with. So I would love that. And happy listening to the next ones. As I mentioned in the beginning, would love any feedback you have. So if you think of something, please feel free to reach out. It's so important for me that, yes, I get this out there and that I enjoy myself. But to reiterate, I really want anyone listening to find value in the topics discussed. So let me know what you think. Good or constructive, I'm happy to hear it. And I hope you'll tune in for the next episode with Dan. I think you'll learn a lot. I certainly did. He's brilliant. So talk soon. Enjoy your day. And appreciate you taking the time to listen.